Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for our first ever virtual Denver Startup Week. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we are more powerful when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. And here we are, virtually showing the world what Denver is made of. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender, identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of these identities. There's something for everyone at Denver Startup Week, and thank you for joining us. Now over to Ben.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you, Jake, and thank you to Friday Health Plans for sponsoring this track. My name is Ben Wright. I'm CEO and founder of a company here in Denver called Velocity Global. I suspect most folks here listening in kind of know our organization and what we do. I am joined with a great group of panelists here. We are going to talk about busting beyond borders, what it means to go global, how companies are doing it, and if you aren't thinking about it, then like what rock have you been living under? So especially with all the stuff that's been happening these days. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to share. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm going to go ahead and go around and introduce fellow panelists. Brendan Walsh with Scaled Agile, Erika Whitmore with KPMG, and then finally Gregg Hodges with PlayerLync. And so what I'll do is I'll have each of you go around and kind of introduce a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kick things off.
Great. Thanks, Ben. So I'm Brendan Walsh. I am the Vice President for the Americas business at Scaled Agile. We are a Boulder-based company that's really in the tech education space, helping the Global 2000 across the globe really expand their agile and lean practices and take a lot of what we practice every day in kind of smaller organizations and scale that up into very large enterprises. So I lead the North America, South America business for Scaled Agile, and also have a long background at Rally Software for a number of years. I led their international sales business. So thanks for having me.
I'm Erika Whitmore. I'm an audit partner with KPMG. Just hit my 20-year mark, so pretty excited about that. Thank you. I lead our private enterprise group, so I work with a lot of high-growth companies like you all who are attending today. So very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm Gregg Hodges. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at PlayerLync. And PlayerLync, we have a mobile enablement platform that allows what we call distributed workforce to give them access to the content that they want when they want it. It's a platform that really works with, all the frontline employees and gives them an opportunity to, whether it's an operational workflow to compliance, education and training. So it's a platform that really connects your corporate office with your distributed workforce. Last 15 years, I've been in technology companies with C-suite titles that are companies that are in growth stage and typically private equity backed.
Fantastic. Amazing panel. I'm sure you'll find the same as we go through this here today. I should probably give you maybe just a little background on myself too, and actually now that I think about it. So I mentioned Ben Wright, CEO and founder of Velocity Global. We were Denver startup, started this thing 6 years ago. I'd kind of put us squarely in the scale up category now at this point. We help companies expand and go global. And in a nutshell, because we're here to talk about you and expansion, not talk about us, but if you're looking to employ someone in a country other than your home country, and you don't have a legal entity or subsidiary by which to employ them, we will employ them for you on your behalf in that country, literally anywhere in the world. I think we have 186 countries. And so we call it international PEO, and international has been a part of my entire career. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started here. Again, we're going to talk about the global advantage of work from anywhere. I've just got a couple slides just to sort of set the stage that we're going to talk about here today. Statistics, things you ought to be thinking about. This is pulled from data. Velocity Global, we do an annual survey of companies, really growth and expansion companies, right? We do an annual survey. I want to caveat this is the results of the survey were literally announced right at kind of the beginning of COVID, right? So the data comes from just pre-COVID. What I think is really interesting is Erika provided some data as well from KPMG, which is a bit kind of post-COVID, in the midst of COVID timing, right? So I think you're going to see some really interesting things there. First and foremost, what we found is that the number one reason why companies are going global is to expand their growth and customer base, okay? Pre-COVID, really important here, pre-COVID, access to top talent was the second most important, right? So want to be able to access talent kind of anywhere in the world. As we'll see, that number has changed pretty significantly in the last 2 quarters. 9 out of 10 US tech companies plan to enter an international market in 2020. Again, this is pre-COVID. This is before your colleague walked into your office and said, you know what, I'd really like to take advantage of that Bahamas program where I can go, right, get like a visa for a year. I think it was Bahamas. Anyway, this is absolutely happening. And my kind of joke or comment early of what rock have you been living under? If you aren't thinking about going global, everybody was already thinking about going global with startups, right? And for tech companies in particular, it's on hyperdrive right now. KPMG has some great stats, and this is a little far away from me, so forgive me. I'm going to look down as I kind of read some of these things. Your investment in the digital infrastructure, and again, this is coming from KPMG's CEO Outlook report. The investment in digital investments is significantly accelerating kind of through this time, right? Think about it. We've got people working from anywhere. We've got to connect from anywhere. So this is significant. 74% are focused on a next generation operating model. 73% creating a seamless customer experience from a digitization standpoint is really, really important. 70% saying creation of new digital business models and revenue streams is coming out of this time. And 2/3 saying a new workforce model, right? With kind of how we deal with human workers is something that we're trying to figure out from a digital transformation standpoint. In terms of the next slide, changing the working world, and we were just kind of talking about this a little bit, and we are going to address this here as the panel. As a result of the pandemic, and I will tell you as a CEO, I am absolutely changed the way that I think about the world of work, right? Which is ironic given that's what we do. 68% CEOs said they will downsize their office space. I hear a collective groan from my friends in the commercial real estate space when they see that statistic. I think it's going to be interesting times, really fascinating times. 76% so they're going to continue to build on the use of digital collaboration, right? No brainer there. 78% said remote working has resulted in significant changes in policies and kind of how the company culture evolves. And then 72% said that working remotely has widened the potential talent pool. So there you go. Go back, 41% said access to global talent was big. Now that number's up to 72%. Finally, and this is what I was talking about earlier, right? 64%, 2 out of 3 workers say they want the flexibility to work remotely at least part of the time. We've surveyed our own employees and colleagues, and that falls exactly in line in kind of what we have. People really want this opportunity for freedom, and that is actually busting kind of completely beyond borders. So with that as a bit of the background, again, in some statistics, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn this over, and what I'd like to do is kind of everybody just to kind of run through their global experience, right? So, Brendan, we're going to start with you. You can take this kind of whatever direction you like, but give people kind of a bit of a background of the different companies you're in, kind of the global work that you did, the highs, the lows, the things people should be thinking about, kind of what led you there, what those responsibilities were. Go for it.
Yep. So I joined Rally Software in 2006, and we were about, I'd say 30 or so people down on Pearl Street and actually Walnut Street in Boulder. And at the time we were just kind of growing, you know, we were, I think, in our B series or so of venture funding. And, you know, we set some parameters around, well, we already had some customers out of the UK and out of Sweden. And so I kind of, by luck, happened into this role where I was supporting our European business and customers. is just kind of the timing of when I joined the organization. And so I'd say that was really kind of a part-time job. And at the time, I was also focusing on helping us bust into the federal US market. So that was where I spent the rest of my time. So kind of these new emerging markets for us. And we set some kind of, artificial, if you will, thresholds for us to make a decision when to expand into the UK, into Europe, et cetera. And that was really around revenue. And of course, you might think about that, right? It's a natural thing. Like, when can I justify opening an office, making the investments, and working with the velocities of the world, et cetera, and hiring employees? And I think what's interesting about today is I think a lot of those thresholds don't really matter as much anymore, right? And I think we'll talk a little more about that later. But that's how we did it there. And we really got the business up to an annual recurring revenue rate that justified, in our minds, opening there. So I expatted over to the UK, lived in London for a couple years, and then hired the team, eventually hired the leader, and moved on from there, and then took over our APAC expansion once I moved back to Colorado. And so I did that actually remotely. We started with Australia, then moved to Singapore and China after that. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of how I got my start. Really a sales-focused expansion. We did not expand any other real functions other than sales and support, and a little bit of marketing internationally, at least at Rally. And then here at Scaled Agile, having the Americas business, that encompasses all of our partner network across the Americas, as well as our direct business with our enterprise customers, and looking to expand further into LATAM and Canada at this point. So one employee in Mexico City, and looking to hire beyond that.
Fantastic. Yeah, appreciate that. We'll do another session another time about being an expat. Right. It'll be a whole hour long, or maybe even beyond session.
It's an amazing experience.
You might need drinks for that one.
We might need drinks for that one. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And fascinating. I mean, Scaled Agile experience, spot on, right? But also Rally. I mean, I actually moved to Denver in 2010, and I remember hearing about that Rally global expansion story kind of as I was coming here. And it was fascinating and fun to watch kind of at that stage of Denver's growth, watching what Rally did with that global expansion. So great experience to pull on. Erika.
Yeah, and I'll be brief so we can get to Gregg, but my experience is more from a service provider perspective. But I've seen a lot of my high growth companies go global maybe at the time too early. I don't think you can say that anymore because the landscape has changed so much, but done it in a lot of different ways, right? Whether you have, feet on the street, right? Or you get others to help you. I think from my perspective, the companies that I've worked with that have done it the best have had experts and advisors helping them along the way. So that's what I would say.
For sure. Appreciate that. Gregg.
You bet. First, I wish that you would have been around when we were going global, because I think the largest challenge we had was really hiring good talent. Some countries are not as receptive to Americans coming in for business as others, but it was part of our business plan. So when we took on some additional institutional money, it was part of the business plan because we had still a pretty large addressable market, but the borders of the US, and it really limited the amount of growth that we could truly get with high penetration. So we knew that we were going to have to do that, and it was part of our business plan. We had a European office already in London, so that gave us a stake in the ground with EMEA, and that was a really friendly pivot for us, going into Great Britain and some of the EMEA countries. It got really interesting when we started expanding. We went from about 3 countries into 32 countries in about 3-year period, and we took our revenue from about 60 million to about 150 million. And let me tell you the dynamics of all that. That sounds great, so the investors love to see that. But the dynamics were very different. Simple things like, how do you have an executive leadership call when you've got 4 different time zones? And you quickly learn that operational workflows become very challenged. I would also say that we didn't have the technology then, I figured about 10 years ago when we did this, as we have today. The Zoom was, not around and some of the things, but as we continued to grow, we had to make some pretty quick decisions, which was, are we going to try to do it organically, or are we going to do it through M&A activity? And interestingly enough, there were a few countries, like in the Middle East, we had to go through an M&A deal, and we never did any due diligence with the office. It was all remote because it was just not a safe opportunity for us to send our crew over there. One of the larger challenges is when you're dealing with technology is how do you regionalize that technology for that geographic area that you're selling into. And so that was a little bit more cumbersome than we anticipated. So we had some pretty good lessons learned as we started going into countries where Northeast Asia, for example, they recognize English as a language, but they want it in their native tongue. So that was something that we had to address. And then support. We had a 24/7 product. It was, we had to implement a follow the sun approach to our customer care because, boy, the busy season, the busy time in Northeast Asia and Australia is not the time when our call centers are up and running in the US. So it was, a lot of thought, and we had to spend a lot of time around operational workflows. And then how do we take the culture that we have and drop that into some of our other offices, and being very respectful of the geographic presence around the teams that we were hiring there and the people and what they wanted as their culture. So we, in a 3-year period, which was a pretty fast growth to go to 32 countries, it was a lot of lessons learned. I'd have to say we bumped our head and stubbed our toe several times. And as we'd say, we ran into a few glass walls that we weren't expecting. But overall, it was a lot of thoughtful planning in the beginning that really helped us pave the way to be able to generate the metrics that we were looking for and the success that we were trying to drive. But, it was a fun time, and it was a great time. It was super exciting to, as we talked about, launching when we decided to go into Australia. That was like a big bell cow moment for us. And then when we said we were going to the Middle East, I think our team thought we lost our mind. But that turned out really, really well through a great M&A deal.
That's fantastic. That's great. Yeah. Through some of that international expansion, I think probably everybody here on the panel, it sounds like if you kind of had some of this, it can be really tough and it can be challenging, but you look back on it and some of those are some of the breakthrough moments. And by the way, next year we're going to do an M&A versus kind of organic global expansion panel, right? I mean, that's,
I can tell you, I'll give you some hints around that.
Make sure you have your tax advisor with you the whole way.
Oh, we have and legal advisors, all of them.
Amen. Right. Amen. You can't do it without. You can't do it without that support network and that really strong support network, no doubt. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of sense of just kind of the background and experience of the panelists. Okay. What I think is we can take this in so many different directions, but I think let's start with what is so timely, which again, 2/3 of workers say they want to work remotely at least part of the time, right? Work from anywhere, we talk about it, it's like the world's greatest work from anywhere experiment is underway right now, right? Fascinating. I mean, I thought I was still gonna, once we opened it up, I thought I was gonna come into the office kind of 3-4 days a week, and I'm maybe coming in 1 day a week right now, right? And kind of working from anywhere. So what policies have you all seen that have kind of shifted with this work from anywhere environment? And again, keep an eye and a mind to the fact that we're talking about busting beyond borders, right? Who wants to start? Erika, do you want to get us started?
Sure, I can start. I think from a KPMG perspective, I would say, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, so it is what it is. But I think we're probably on the more conservative side of things, right? So as of right now, none of our offices are open, I don't think. Denver is a pilot office that we'll be slowly rolling some things out. But I think in terms of working remotely, at least from our perspective, and you said this earlier, it's been a great experiment, right? And we were set up to work remotely, but I'll tell you what, we work pretty damn good remotely. And the other thing is our clients don't want us back. So I'm an audit partner. So remember, we're the auditors, right? Not everybody loves us all the time. But they're like, look, we're having our own space issues. We don't really need to worry about you guys yet, right? And so Mike Barrett, our office managing partner, is actually having to deal with, I may have more people coming back than what I had originally planned for, because we generally plan for 25% of our workforce to be there, right? So that'll be interesting. But I think in terms of policy changes, really it's very, very different what our employees want right now versus before. Flexibility is huge, right? I am part-time school teacher. So I have an online schooler at home and he has technical difficulties. And so, I think a lot of us are dealing with parenting, being a teacher and trying to be a professional as well. And so I think that flexibility, and I let my team know, hey guys, I'm going to be on every call I can be, but I may have to step away for a minute because my 10-year-old's having a technical issue that I have to help him with. So I think flexibility, right, is huge. Another thing, and this may be interesting, and it may be a KPMG or a service provider thing, but during our busy season, we have our employees, if they work over 10 hours a day, they get their meals, right? Well, there's tax consequences to that. And so as of right now, because everybody's working from home, that's not available to our folks. And it really, really is a problem. And so that's not a policy change yet. I think our employees are hoping that it will be, but just some of the things that we're kind of dealing with as we go through the work remotely thing.
Fascinating. We haven't talked about this, but I actually started my career as an auditor. And so
Did you?
I would think now not being put in like a coat closet in the client, right? As I'm doing that audit, I'd much rather work from kind of my home.
Some of our clients have gotten a lot nicer.
All right, that's probably true.
I said some.
That's right. Yeah, actually, those are the ones that where they actually put you in like a nice conference room.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some nice space. Not right now, but
You could have whatever space you want in our office now.
nice. All right. Yeah, now we can.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Gregg, policy shifts related to all this.
First of all, we had our first ever in my career a virtual audit,
Yeah.
and it went really well. So
Good.
I I kind of echo what Erika's saying. I don't know that we've really changed a lot of policies, but I think you hit on the key element, which is flexibility. One of the key elements for us is how do we maintain the culture? I mean, we've got a really connected, collaborative culture of our group of folks. And all of a sudden, now we had 60 remote offices. 98% of our staff were in our office here. We had, a few people that were distributed around the US. But so we were a little hesitant because it's like, oh my gosh, we're used to everybody coming in. We're used to doing things at the snack wall. We're, all this drive-by meeting stuff. And so we quickly, I have to hand it, our IT group just like at a flip of the switch, really implemented the tools. We're like everybody, we probably have now more tools than we need between Teams and Zoom and Slack, but they did a great job and we really didn't miss a beat. It was interesting, our development team, our CTO is like, oh my gosh, this remote thing's just not gonna work. And I don't know how we're gonna make it, and rightfully so, because he had a lot of huddle meetings. And when we started opening up the office where 25% of the people come in, they were the first one to go, nope, we're going to be working from home. We've got this wired so well that we're so happy with it. But the flexibility is the main thing. And we continue to remind ourselves, even as late as last week with kids going back to school, the pressures that people are feeling today is so different than what they've had to experience before. Whether it's ambiguity of when do I get to quit wearing my mask, or when does my health club open, or my kids, I've got each one of my direct reports are in different school districts and they all have different models. And we were about a month into the working from home, and I actually put together a virtual lunch, and I said, bring your kids, bring your pets, because we're seeing them running around in the background. You'll be on a Zoom call and all of a sudden, Susie or Johnny runs in the background, or the dog's barking. It's like, this is part of who we are. Bring the kids, bring the dogs. We want to get to know them because we're seeing them, but it was also a way to help them feel comfortable that when the dog barks, it's like, oh my gosh, sorry about that. Or when, the kid comes up and they're having a meltdown because their iPad doesn't work. So it really is around that flexibility was one of the main things we focused on, and truly staying connected with everybody. And, Ben, to your point, I mean, we've had the availability for up to 50% of our staff to come in, and we can almost fire a cannon off in there on any given day, where they've adapted. Also, they have to continue to do this because of the things they have to maintain at home. So it's quite a pivot in the workforce. And I think that as you look forward and lean into forward as we're going through this multi-generational shift in the workforce, it's going to be a step that I would be surprised if we ever go back to the pre-COVID normal, that we will land in a space where we're comfortable with people not being in the office every day. But what comes with that is training. We've had to train managers. We've had to spend more time with managers understanding, how do I measure productivity? Before, I could look over there and say, yep, my team, they all look pretty busy, versus now, what kind of metrics do I need to look at? And the transparency you need to have up and throughout the whole company around how things are going, what we're doing, and how we're working together.
For sure. Yeah, that's great. It made me think I had this really cool experience where I was actually on a Zoom call with one of our new employees in Europe. And they said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's my dad. My dad just like walked into my room, and I was like, no, hold on. Bring him over here. Let's say hi. And it's like, it's so cool. Like, it brings the human element. Yeah. There's difficult parts to it too, right? But
we bring our whole selves to work, like, for real, right? Finally,
yeah. Right? Yeah. Finally, where you don't have to kind of pretend like there's just this glass wall that happens between home and work, right? Yeah. Anyway, Ben.
Yeah. So for us, we had some big internal, I guess, we don't really have a lot of policies at Scaled Agile, or guidance, if you will, but certainly one of the big things that we're doing now, we were talking about earlier, is viewing the office in Boulder as being open to people if they want to go in. And our CEO talks about that as kind of an office as a service, because people are under a lot of stress at home right now. And so if you need to get away and you want to go in, and it's actually a pretty safe place. I've gone up there a few times since March, and I was the only one there. 2 floors, beautiful views. It's great. So it's good for just a basic change of scenery. And then we've done a lot of other things, like Gregg described. We've had story time with the kids, and at lunch, and read books, and and so we're doing some cool things like that. Those aren't policy changes per se, but the other, and all the tools. One of the big things is that our remote workers that we already had pre-COVID are telling us how much better we are now at working with them, and how much more sensitive we are to them at this point, and the technology we've put in place. They're like, oh, you guys finally get it, what it's like to be sitting here in Washington, D.C. or in Berlin, and so that's been really cool. Now, externally, because what we do at Scaled Agile is we develop Agile and Lean training content, and we license that to over 400 partners around the world, and to enterprises around the world to deliver that content to the enterprise employees. So we don't actually go out and deliver that training. Our partners do, and the enterprises train themselves. They get certified to train. And what this has done from a policy standpoint externally is we've had to, well, first of all, the first change is we pivoted our entire business from being instructor-led, in-person required training to being obviously remote. Yeah. And so we had to, we were already on a mission to build an online platform and testing remote delivery. How does that really work, using our platform and things like that. And within 3 weeks' time, we delivered a new virtual classroom environment. So something that would have taken us, we thought, we'll do this in 2020. It'll be a cool experiment, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe a new revenue stream for us. We were able to do something really fast. And so all of our customers and partners around the world have really been happy with that. So we've taken that in-person requirement, obviously, off the table. The other interesting thing is that most of our partners, even though KPMG is a partner and we have big folks like that, most of them are smaller, right? They're like all of you that are watching this. There might be 2 or 3 people, maybe 10, and they're Agile coaches, Lean coaches, et cetera. And what this has allowed them to do is really start to tap into new markets and deliver training in time zones that, before it was like, if I'm going to run a training class in Denver, well, everyone had to come into Denver. Now I can sit at home in Denver and run a training class and tap into 3 or 4 different time zones throughout North and South America. And so it's broadening their business now because they can deliver things to people where they used to not have that reach. So it's kind of like, you know, I went to the Atlanta Agile meetup a couple weeks ago that was all online, just like this, right? Yeah. And normally I'd have to jump on a plane and fly to Atlanta if I wanted to do that. Now you don't have to do that anymore. So.
Great point. You know, to dovetail on that a little bit, I think it's really interesting and fascinating kind of how equalizing this has become globally for jobs, right? One policy change for us is that about a month and a half ago, for the very first time in history of our company, and again, which is again somewhat ironic, and I admit the irony given what we do as a company, rather than posting a job in Amsterdam, we posted plus or minus 2 time zones from Amsterdam, right? The job responsibilities are in Europe, and our headquarters for Europe, which we actually just recently announced, is in Amsterdam. But as long as you're within 2 time zones, one direction or the other, right? We're perfectly fine with that. And we're getting applications of really talented people from all over, right? All over kind of within that area. So I think that's really interesting. And I actually, the timing is slightly unfortunate. I wish this Denver Startup Week was next week, or at least that we'd had the presentation last week. I'm actually getting a presentation from a committee within our own company that is taking a look at whether we could get rid of offices globally, take office expense down to 0. I'll tell you the impetus for that is I ran some numbers a month or 2 months ago and said, gosh, in the next few years, what impacts would it have on the organization if we took rent expense down to 0? $90 million of enterprise value.
Wow, that's a lot.
We actually can't take it down to 0. Like that's not actually good. Office as a service. In Dubai, the number of visas you get are dependent on the square footage of your office space, right? So you can't have workers in Dubai without visas, and so you have to have an office space. And so the theory actually is not in and of itself going to hold water, but it's interesting, and I can't wait to see what our team comes up with, whether that's even going to be possible or not, right? Or some form of it. So, okay. I go back to, a previous slide where we said, 9 out of 10 US tech companies kind of specifically said they plan to go global in 2020, right? And then we've talked a lot about work from anywhere and kind of, man, you can really employ people anywhere these days, right? Think about the audience, think about everybody kind of tuned in here today. What do those entrepreneurs need to be thinking about when going global? Okay. We got compliance, right? We got to talk about compliance, right? For better or worse, not to
Can't ignore it. It'll cost you money.
100%, right? But we got to talk about compliance, right? Not in a scary way, but just honest, be honest, got to talk about compliance. Let's talk about time zones. Let's talk about culture, like you were talking about, right? And so, Gregg, do you want to, what Denver Startup Week, people dialed in here, what do they need to think about going global?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think one of the key elements is, who are the advisors I need to have around me? I think one of you had mentioned before, if you're going into a new country, you could have the smartest legal counsel and financial advisors in the US, but they might not be as skilled in that country you're going to. So I think one of the key elements is, who's my team that's going to help me sort through not only the planning, but the things that I'm not even thinking about, that they would bring experience to the table. It's always what I don't know is what scares me. And trust me, you're going to have plenty of that's going to come up. So I would really urge you to make sure that you put a team of experienced people around you. Make sure you have legal counsel. Make sure you have financial counsel. The governance, the compliance, I got to have people. But that will make life so much easier instead of thinking, oh, we can do this, Yeah, we did expansion somewhere before in a prior life, but things are different today than they were probably in the prior life. I know that in the example that I gave where we grew, things are a lot different today, and I'm sure that we would do things a lot differently than we did back then. So I think the first step to me was put a really strong team of advisors around you so that you can have good counsel, good advice, and eliminate some of those speed bumps that you're going to run into.
For sure. That's great. Erika, what do you think? And maybe you could
Well,
even
Gregg
kind of
kinda
deep dive a
took
little bit
mine.
too into kind of more like specific
Yeah.
compliance stuff that
Yeah.
tend to trip companies up. Too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having, from a compliance perspective, I think a lot of the folks that are attending this will know this, but maybe not to the extent. I'm constantly amazed, and I'm not a tax partner, so I'll just say that, right? But I'll tell you, I need our tax partners. They are incredibly valuable when you're going global. Not only that, just it's not just the country itself, but it's also the region. It's also the location, right? Taxes are huge. Legal, I would agree with that. Also, unfortunately, a lot of places have statutory audit requirements, right? So depending on where you're going, again, just having the right team around you. I think, at least from what I've seen from the companies I've worked that have that have gone global, they've got the business side down. They can probably even figure out, how to grow their customer base, but it's all the back office stuff that can really, really get you in trouble and cost a lot of money that's just not necessary. So that's what I would say.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a little different slant because we have experts that just spoke on kind of the compliance and tax stuff. But so I'll look at it more from the market opportunity standpoint. I think for the audience here, I think, what was the stat on the number of businesses that said that they had the wrong digital strategy, or they're looking for a new way of working, right? The new operating model.
Yeah. It's a pretty decent.
That's too far. Can't see.
Yeah,
it.
that's okay.
I'll come up with
okay.
it.
That's okay.
It's over there somewhere.
It's in
Yeah.
the 70s.
It's in the 70s. So companies are looking for new ways of working, right? They were already kind of on that mission for a number of years. And that's really what we help and our partners help companies do, is change the way they work, their mindset, their culture, et cetera. So for us, actually, some of our most disrupted customers, like in the airline industry, oil and gas, folks like that, they're really doubling down right now on transforming the way they work, because they figured, they realized with COVID that they thought they had a good digital transformation strategy, and they really didn't.
Right.
So
It wasn't good enough.
Or it wasn't good
support.
enough. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So building that new operating model, if you're watching this and your business is disruptive, changes the way people work, provides technology around that in that kind of general area, I think there's a really big market opportunity for you to expand. You might have started out and said, well, I'm really going to focus on the Rocky Mountain region because I'm based here in Denver, or maybe the Western US, because we don't have the bandwidth to go further. Well, now actually you can be reading the business journals in Amsterdam, in Stockholm, et cetera, because it doesn't really matter anymore. And those big companies that you might have great technology for,
They need you.
Yeah, exactly. So I think now more than ever, for the startup world, these big customers, these bigger enterprises, even smaller ones, are in need of what we're all developing.
Yeah, for sure. That's really good. I think I would add just from my standpoint, my experience, and for the record, I'm a CPA, audit, right, was Big Four, come from a real compliance perspective, from a tax, corporate compliance, and now in the employment compliance space. I've found you got to be compliant around all of it, but day to day and most wide reaching across the organization, and this is going to sound self-serving, but trust me, it's not, it is employment, right? Getting the employment piece right when you have people is where I see companies trip up the most and has the most broad reaching impact, right? Don't get me wrong. Like if you're not filing your taxes, right?
Or you don't even know you should be paying them.
Or if you don't even know you should be paying
Yeah.
them, right? All of a sudden, and we've all had this happen, you get a letter written in German from the German tax authorities saying, you owe us $1 million, euros in a month, right? And there's basically nothing you can do to contest this, right? We've all had that, right? And it's always going to happen. And it's difficult for the organization. It's particularly difficult for kind of the finance side of the house. But if you don't get the employment piece right, man, it affects HR, it affects your strategy, it affects kind of all kinds of different folks. And so,
yeah, I mean, I think that was a big one for us at Rally, and picking the right countries to help us kind of take the baby step in. And there are certain countries that it's not a baby step, and you can get yourself on the hook for something that you never wanted to or can afford as a small company, as a startup. Whereas there are other countries that are a lot more friendly from an employment law standpoint and things like that. So that is a big one. I agree.
Yeah, no doubt. We held off setting up our own operations in Brazil as long as we possibly could. I don't know if you guys could all see it. The whole panel just went, yeah. All due respect to my Brazilian friends, the country Brazil, it's an amazing country. It's just a very complex place to do business, particularly relates to employment. And we know this because this is what we do. But literally somebody from my organization about a month ago said, oh, now we got to deal with works councils down there, right? And we know that because we've had to deal with it all along, but now it's our works council, right? And oh my gosh, it's so tough. Okay. Quick plug, I just got handed a question that came in, and I forgot to mention this earlier. I think we have the ability to pose questions and ask questions. I think there's maybe 10, 15 minutes left. If you have questions, pose them. I'm certain I'm going to speak for the panel. I'm certain if there's questions we don't have the time to get to, I'm sure we'd all be happy to kind of collect those and share our thoughts if you do have them. So love this question. John from Boulder. It feels like this is kind of just like staged, but seriously, John from Boulder. How can I help get companies over the hurdle of considering a foreign candidate when looking for an experienced UX hire, right? So, I'm going to paraphrase what I think, and I see this thing all the time, is I just found this amazing candidate and they're in Belarus, right? Who knows, right? Wherever they happen to be. How do I get my manager, the executive team, whoever, kind of over the hump to hire those folks? Any advice for John and Boulder?
Well, I'll take this. Take a first stab at it. So if the person is in Belarus, for example, right? We had this challenge in our business where some of our customers were waiting till this COVID thing passes, and then they're going to go back to instructor-led in-person training. And so what we had to talk them into is, given the uncertainties, why wait? Yeah. Your transformation can't stop, right? I mean, you're losing millions every day that you're kind of operating in this old model. So we had to do a lot of work with who we came up with a persona called the cautious Kara. And we went out and did a big campaign to get the cautious Karas over the line, over the hump, and fear of doing remote training. And we provided all of our technology to them. We paired with them. We showed them how to do it. So it's a little different, but I think, what I would say to John, or if I were talking to John's boss or something, I'd say, well, given the uncertainty, we never know. Why pass up that talent? I think we were talking about someone that Scaled Agile came across a while back, super talented person who lives in Slovakia. And at the time we were in this culture mindset of, we really kind of want everybody in Boulder, or maybe in Germany, maybe in the UK, but Slovakia. But he's an amazing person. Well, perhaps we want to go explore, what he's up to again, because we can.
Yeah, if I could dovetail on that real quick, I think it also starts with your hiring philosophy and truly having a reminder of saying, we've made remote working, and whether they're just across town or they're in another state or another continent, the reality is stick to what you're looking for, which is, to paraphrase, from the NFL, take the best available athlete for the position. But regardless of where they're at, we can handle some of the remote challenges that may be a little bit different than somebody working across town or in another state. We've proven that we can make remote working actually function for us. So kind of to use Brendan's analogy, if I was sitting here with John, I'd be saying, feel confident that remote working works, stay committed to hiring the best person you can for that role, and rely on the team around you that's going to be managing that person, giving them the right productivity metrics, but don't get, sidelined around the fact that, wow, this goes against having everybody in Denver or in Boulder. And the reality of it is, you can do it and be confident you can do it, and press forward with getting you the best potential candidate on your team as you can.
Maybe just one thing to add to that, right when we all went into quarantine, we learned very quickly to ask where everybody was located, because even though they were hired in Colorado, they're no longer here. They're in Utah, they're in Canada, which is phenomenal, right? That's the beauty of it. So yeah, I would just supporting what you're all saying. It doesn't matter where you are.
We've had some employees request moves to be closer to family now, and people are reprioritizing things in life, and so we've been really sensitive to that. And I think the answer probably would have been not to them, a year ago, and now it's like, go for it. You need to move to Seattle or wherever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And Greg, like you talked about too, I think this was really different, much more difficult 10 years ago, right? Today, you've got you've got this like the thing that we do, international PEO, where you can literally hire and employ someone in a country in the blink of an eye and stay really flexible for kind of those early headcount, right? That wasn't available. That whole model wasn't even around 7 years ago, right? So you can go do that. And then if you have a requirement to do so, or you grow, then you hire KPMG to set up your subsidiary there, right?
There you go.
Nice but seriously, like there's now, not just from a technology perspective, but there's now models to be able to actually employ people flexibly anywhere, and to try before you buy, and then kind of grow and scale as you need to do, right? And so. Yeah. And again, I'm going to look back on this someday and be like, man, I can't believe at Velocity Global, like we help companies employ people kind of remotely all across the globe. I can't believe it took us this long to kind of latch onto this thing, right? It took something like COVID for us even to be able to say, you know what, maybe you don't have to be in Denver, right? Maybe you don't have to be in Denver. There are some hiring and termination decisions that have been made for us over the years that I now look back on with regret. Yeah. So, okay. Great question. Who was that? John from Boulder. Great question, John from Boulder. If there's others, send them in. We're happy to do with them. Okay. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure I'm kind of cherry picking the best ones. Well, I got a good one to kind of finish up with. Biggest challenge you faced going global? Biggest benefit you faced going global? Or working from a global company, whatever. Who wants to take it?
Well, I'll be glad to jump in, let my cohorts here think a little bit. Biggest challenge we faced was truly around the support model. And we quickly learned that where we thought English speaking would be acceptable in most countries, that we learned very, very quickly that it was not acceptable in some countries. So our biggest challenge is we had to pivot. And again, we had a 24/7 product. We had to pivot our support model, and that accelerated our follow the sun mentality where we could hand off between continents. But that was the biggest challenge, because all of a sudden, as we were growing and people would call in, we couldn't understand them. It wasn't working very well. That gets back to, the ownership group or your customer decision maker. So that was a huge surprise to us. So, and we had to pivot very, very quickly. And then the biggest benefit, we were fortunate to have international customers in the US, which made it a lot easier for us to go land in EMEA, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, because they had facilities there. They were customers here. It was an easier sale for us. And not only that, going back to what I said before with advisors, they really became advisors when we went into new areas. They had businesses there. They were quick to be able to share the pitfalls and things that hey, don't run into this. You need this kind of compliance help, whatever the case may be. But the huge benefit for us was that we had existing customers with long relationships that we were able to leverage as we did do the global expansion.
Yeah, I think for us, in my rally days, it was probably around employment, making sure we're choosing the right folks. I was new to the UK culture. We eventually expanded into Amsterdam and new to the Dutch culture. And so you make some missteps, right? You think you have someone really great and realize after a while, oops, and that can happen here, of course, too. But there are additional challenges then to potentially needing to part ways. Getting the leadership right can be very difficult, and the stakes are extremely high. So it's one thing when you're hiring an employee, like an individual contributor in a foreign country. When you hire someone at a leadership level, it brings in a whole new set of nuances that you really want to think long and hard about. And that's probably why they expatted me originally, so they didn't get themselves into that, quagmire. So for us at Scaled Agile, it's really, I think, more about our internationalization strategy and where to localize and where not. To Gregg's point, for us, we license words, training content. So words matter, and we got to get that right in Japanese, for example. And so that's a whole new shift for us that we're working through.
And Ben, maybe I'll marry kind of our two topics a little bit. What I've witnessed, outsider looking in, right, being the advisor a lot of times, is really the culture, which is no different than what we're dealing with right now with remote work, right? Well, that's not true. It is different if you speak a different language and you're in a different country, but the concept, I think, is relatable, right? Like, how do we onboard our brand new people remotely? How do we get them ingrained in our culture? How does our culture need to change because we're all remote? So that's what I would say is maybe a benefit and a challenge all at the same time.
Totally. It's interesting. I was trying to think of how I would answer the question, and you talking about this makes me think a lot about, well, one of the biggest challenges we've had is setting up bank accounts globally. That's just story for another time. That's really, really hard. I don't care who you work with. It's really tough. But I think one of our biggest challenges going forward, and one of the biggest benefits, both historically and going forward, is how we roll out our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives globally, right? We're working really hard on this right now globally. And it's one thing if you're doing it in Denver, Colorado, right? The fundamental things that you're trying to accomplish to make it diverse, to make it equitable, and to make it inclusive is the same no matter where you are. But what that looks like and how you accomplish it
the
in
actions,
Singapore versus Dubai versus Bogota, right, is going to be a real challenge. Yeah. Okay. Another question came in. Thank you, Jason, who is, speaking of going global, based in Thailand.
That's
Jason
awesome.
says, do you think the decline in issuance of U.S. H-1B visas each year will make the entry for U.S. small and medium-sized businesses more difficult?
It's a good
this
question.
can be a weighty topic. Let's try to keep this all above board here. Yeah. I'll give you guys a sec to think about that real quick. I will tell you kind of real life experience. We've seen a significant increase in business requests from companies from our standpoint because people were not able to get that visa in the current, the current administration. And so they need to be employed in foreign countries. So they're looking to a model like ours. We're also having situations where people are either not being renewed or being sent home, or in some cases electing to go back home in places where these companies say these are very important people for us, but we don't have a legal entity in that country. And so we've been doing a lot of work around that. Which isn't the answer to your question. I don't know, not necessarily getting better or different, but that is a workaround, but it's not really here for the U.S.
Well, I think to Jason's question, I mean, there's no question that it's impacting innovation and our ability to bring top talent in, whether you're a large enterprise or a startup. And so something needs to change there. But maybe back to John's question, this UX designer, wherever they were based, you can get started now sooner with the person. And if you wanted to bring them into the country and get them the visa, and now that is impeded for various reasons, at least you can get started with them and hire them, let them work from home, and then worry about that later if we can change some of the current thinking from the administration. So it is impeding, I believe, innovation for this country.
We have a real life example going on right now where we have a developer, it's on our product team, that visa is getting ready to expire, and we're in about a 6-month window, and he had a plan relative to doing something different. Hugely valuable. We want to keep him super talented. Came here from his homeland country in India. And so now we're working with him, just running to your point, to leverage what we've learned about remote working and saying, hey man, wherever you feel like you want to go, if you want to go back home, we'll support you in that. We'll figure out how to make that work. But again, it gets back to talented person. We want to retain the individual, and we're figuring out a way to make that work. So again, probably not exactly what Jason's looking for an answer, but you have to think differently today than you did yesterday.
I wouldn't have anything to add. I would just say work from anywhere.
Okay. All right. We're getting towards the end. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. This is awesome. There are a couple questions. I know, Lisa, I've already been handed that we haven't got a chance to get to. So we'll figure out if there's a way to kind of get back to you. We'll post those answers to those questions. And I think, you know, for any of us, I know for myself, I make myself available, you know, for startups that are kind of thinking about going global. Advice, you know, from the trenches, right? Happy to give that, right? So track kind of any one of us down after this event virtually. But last question, and this is meant to be quick, right? Because we don't have a ton of time left, so it's meant to be quick. But I'm hitting you with this. You don't necessarily know what's coming. Work from anywhere. If you could go work from anywhere, where would it be?
I would go work in somewhere in the Roaring Fork Valley, up in the mountains, Colorado.
You're going to hate me, but I'm working from where I want to work from, and that's Parker, Colorado.
Nice.
So,
I love
sorry
that.
for being lame, but
Yeah, darn, you took my answer. I think that I'd want to either go to Spain or Costa Rica.
nice.
Great
Those are good choices.
I think I'd move everywhere every 3 months.
Because
Until
there's
I
no
die.
reason not to. There's no reason not to.
No reason not to. I don't know how we do that with kids in school, but okay.
They go online.
They go online. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we're at the hour, so I want to go ahead and finish this off. So Brendan, Erika, Gregg, thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you, Denver Startup Week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. I hope there was something you were able to take out of it. Enjoy Denver Startup Week. And thank you so much to all the sponsors who honestly make this whole thing happen for all of us in attendance. And so go global, be brave, get help.
Exactly.
Reach out if you need anything.
That's right.
That's right.